Deon is the co-founder of Marco Polo Advisory, but he also, and he pointed this out to me earlier, he's also comes from the banking industry. He ran a private bank at Investec for many, many years. So he understands the opportunities, but also the challenges of dealing with this tsunami of data in a banking environment. Deon's going to be talking to us today about leveraging big data to create more efficient operations, higher profits, and happier customers. Deon, over to you.
Thanks very much, Louisa, and good morning, everybody from Joburg. Thank you for the topic and that kind introduction. I actually ran the private bank only for 2 years, Louisa, but I was at Investec for 11 years and ran various businesses for them. And part of that journey was helping to build an analytics team for the business. So today's topic is about leveraging big data to create more efficient operations, higher profits, and happier customers. I think that topic in itself, we could probably talk on that for a few days, but I'd like to go through just a few slides, and some of my thoughts on this, and maybe share some of my learnings over the years that we've tried to develop these functions or build these functions out in banking environments. I'm also with Caroline helping me with my slides because my slide control is not working. So Caroline, if you can change the slide for me, that would be great. All right, so here it is. This is what we're trying to talk about here is using big data, and I'll give some stats after this just to kind of reiterate what Louisa said about exponential growth in this area. But I think what's really important is that looking at these 3 areas, which is customers, obviously customer satisfaction, profitability, and operational efficiencies, is that really, if you get these right on any level in a business environment, these talk to each other and really create what I think is a kind of a virtuous circle. You know, if your customers are happy, you should be driving more profits. If you have operational efficiencies, your customers should equally feel those as well, and that it'll give your frontline people more time to deal with and serve them. At the same time, if your profits are up, it gives you opportunities to invest back into your customers and into operational efficiency. So this virtuous circle, I think, is really important, and I'm going to take you through some thoughts on how to get this right. Just to start off, though, and Caroline, the next slide, please. Some stats. I've just got a few facts, and this kind of talks to what Louisa was saying. I think that when we talk about big data, and people think about big data in many different ways, here we're talking to, and I've just taken a definition from Lexico, which is a Harvard organization. Big data refers to extremely large data sets that may be analyzed computationally to reveal patterns, trends, and associations, especially relating to human behavior and interactions. So, big data is important, and when people ask me, how come this hasn't been as core, as critical in the last 30 or 40 years, and I've been running my business for 40 or 50 years, people say, without having to worry about anything other than some financial analytics and some expert systems, why do I need this now? And the graph on the right, I think, shows what's happened. The reality is that technology has been enabled not just by incredible transformation in processing power and processing, but also just by the incredibly large data sets and the amount of data that is being produced. This graph is actually about data consumed and not data produced. For what it's worth, a zettabyte, where you can see in 2010 total global data consumption was 2 zettabytes. That's a trillion gigabytes. I think I'm getting that right. But just that's not important. What's important is you can see from 2010 to where we are now in 2021. The dates have gone a bit squiff, but in 2021, 71 zettabytes, and forecast in 2025 to grow to 180 zettabytes. So I think you can show that tremendous exponential growth in data consumption has really driven not just the need for analysis and big data analytics, but also has actually driven the technology and enabled it as well. I think there's a stat just below that says that by 2013 already kind of 64% of global financial services companies were on the bus, if you like, and already had incorporated analytics as part of their infrastructure. The question is, how effective is some of that, and is it being done in a meaningful way? So you can see as well that there is a cost of bad data quality, and this is obviously all encompassing. But in 2016, IBM's estimate of the yearly cost of poor quality data was about $3.1 trillion, and that's just in the US. That gives you an idea of what what bad data can do, if you like. And I think that what Gartner has said, and that's the final point on the slide, is that business leaders are starting to understand that analytics is not just a separate function, but actually needs to become a core function. And it is not a good idea potentially to have this completed by a separate team that sits somewhere off in the business, but doesn't necessarily have communication or access to the rest of the team. So a question for transformation going forward is, do you have analytics teams in isolation? Are they spread out across your organization? Or is there a function that brings it all together? And have you considered making this a core function rather than just separate teams, if you like? Thanks, Caroline. You can change the slide. All right. So I think we speak about analytics. We saw that already by 2013, 64% of global financial services companies has incorporated this. And I think that from the perspective of meaningful analytics, what is important, and in our experience, what we found is that unless your analytics and your data-driven strategy, if you like, starts from your business strategy, then it is very difficult to make meaningful decisions and have meaningful outcomes. And what we mean by that is you need to take your strategy as a starting point and ask some key business questions. Those key business questions should come from areas of your business that you are already aware of and that need focus, and you need to use this as a prioritization. In other words, there are so many different projects and initiatives you could start off on. Best way to prioritize is to take that from your business strategy, ask some key business questions, and then get the analysts and the analytics teams to look at those. Once you have that and outcomes, the insights coming from those questions will then normally deliver actionable outcomes or data-driven decisions, stuff that you can really work on and make and have as an effective intervention in your business, and really understand that those outcomes, rather than just being driven in isolation, actually come from your business objectives and your business strategy. So the points on that slide, I think reiterate that. Caroline, you can move on, please. Thanks. So I think with many of these initiatives and in many of the banks and the businesses that I've seen and have been involved in, there is an analytics function and analytics functions across the business. Many analysts and analytics employees sit in IT, for example, financial analytics, in your risk management and your credit risk guys. Obviously all have these skills. But the question is, does everybody understand what they're doing? And how do you actually build a data-driven culture in a world where, as we see, this is going to drive business imperatives for a long time to come? So what can you do? The analytics and how you actually perform that is one thing, but how do you drive this through the organization? And how do you have a data-driven culture within your organization? Some of the thoughts around that is that, analytics is not just for the mathematicians and the coders and the IT department. It needs to be understood throughout the organization, and you need buy-in for that. I think in the previous presentation we said that this is around all new technology. There is some change management, and you need to, in my experience, bring this through in a helpful way. That includes instilling awareness and literacy amongst employees, and this is very important for management and execs. You don't need to be expert data scientists, but you really should have a level of data literacy. To create environment of collaboration between the different stakeholders is very important. On the previous slide, we saw that if you start your process from your strategy, you get people involved to ask key business questions, and then let the analysts look at the data that pertains to that part of your business. From that, you draw insights and actionable outcomes. That process is very cross-functional, involves a lot of different skills and a lot of different people. And for it to work, you need to drive this collaboration between the people in your analytics team, the guys in your IT department who are critical in helping you with your data, and then the business people themselves. And I think that you need to, in order to get this right, people have to understand what the goals are, and they also need to see when these initiatives succeed. I think the next point is probably a bit more of a practical one, but much of the analytics that we've seen, if you don't have great data and great inputs and clean data going into your analytics engines or your analytics teams, then you're not going to have great outcomes. And this can take probably 70 to 80% of the time, if you like, in the big data analytics value chain. Your data conditioning, which just means getting your data in the right shape, making sure that the inputs are going in correctly, and that if you're taking data from different core systems or external sources and internal sources, that these can talk to each other or come together, whether that's in a data mart or a data lake, that you can draw on through the business without having to use diverse systems and different applications. So get your data sorted out first, get it cleaned and conditioned, and that'll help you get accuracy up front. I think I've said this before, but understand your key business objectives and let these drive your analytics initiatives. Again, if you can have some very, very smart people who, without the direction of the strategy, can take this upon themselves. And I've seen some of the most tremendous models and artificial intelligence outcomes being built, but really then you kind of look at them and say, well, what is the point of that, and how does it talk back to the business? And often these models are not used or they're not put in place because it seemed like a great idea, but it never really had any strategic input. And then, I think another point is just make sure that when you go through an analytics process and you have people looking at data, finding the patterns and driving insights, that when these come back to the business and when these come back to the people who are driving strategy, or salespeople, frontline people, that this is delivered in an understandable and in a way that you can probably render visibly, whether that's a dashboard or something that you can come back to on a regular basis, but that needs to be clear, understandable, and it doesn't look like a screen full of code. And that's very important. Also, real-time analytics, I think, is critical. I remember kind of many years ago waiting for business objects reports to come out weekly, and there were hundreds of them, and they're all on spreadsheets, and that is how you kind of tracked your progress. As opposed to some of the technology now, which brings this up into dashboards, and you can look at your different requirements and KPIs in real time and have this information coming through accurately and timelessly, rather than waiting for a week or 2 weeks to get a static report. And then of course, just a final point on this is, when you are doing any processing, analytics processing, big data processing, and this of course involves client data and individual data, that you need to make sure that you're conducting this within a legal governance framework and with very careful consideration of the local regulations and the frameworks, whether that is a South African POPIA, whether that is a European GDPR, or any of the other jurisdictions. You need to be aware of those, and also aware of the fact that some of that legislation, for example, GDPR, if you're an African bank and you have European clients on your client base and you're processing their data, that you would need to comply with that as well. It's very important. You want to make sure that you're processing for the purposes that you need, and that you have given those explicit notices, and that you have explicit consents where you are processing data in any meaningful way. Caroline, thanks. Pop on to the next slide. All right, so just back to our slides here, and apologies, some of the formatting is just rendered slightly badly there. But I think coming back to that virtuous circle that we spoke about, and I know that it is very difficult to give absolutely specific examples because there are literally hundreds of interventions that you could do from an analytics perspective within your organization. But just to give you some real examples here and some practical examples of how you can take big data within your business. And again, I think many organizations are doing some of this, but some of them perhaps are doing things a little bit more in a more complicated way when they don't necessarily need to. So some ideas, you can use analytics to automate, to streamline high volume manual processes. In a banking environment where you have a lot of clients and high volume processes, this could mean anything from preparing a bank reference letter to preparing a letter for a visa, perhaps. Can you automate those? And when you have hundreds or thousands of employees and hundreds of thousands or millions of clients, you can effectively use analytics to interrogate operational processes, look where you have manual processes to automate. And of course, when you extrapolate a couple of minutes time saving in any manual process across thousands of people, that delivers real savings, real profitability, and it also is very helpful to customers. Some other ideas are, you can really interrogate your big data to analyze and optimize internal capital. Whichever Basel regime you're on, analytics, in my experience, very, very helpful in looking at the data. Anything from reducing your capital on a home loan book just by looking at loan to values and perhaps considering a revaluation of some of those properties if they haven't been revalued, can help bring down your tier one capital. Also across ops risk capital, market risk capital, interventions there can be very useful. And of course, by bringing down your capital requirements, you automatically enhance your ROE. I think a lot of us and a lot of businesses have used for some years already, and it's an example of where advanced analytics and AI is being used in banking, in our voice recognition, in KYC and onboarding and identity verification, which has come along and advanced quite a lot in the last 5 years in a really practical way now. You can literally onboard a client with a cell phone by taking pictures of ID documents and of the client themselves. I think the important thing within risk management is that we have been, banks in my experience have been using analytics and risk management again for many, many years. But with the enhanced technology, being able to bring external sources from a risk management perspective, from credit management to credit applications, and to look at how this affects your risk appetite within the business is also very, very useful. Then big data to improve and measure marketing initiatives and sales. Again, if you think about it up front, do the analytics and really understand your marketing initiative and your measurables, then coming back to that and actually understanding your ROI in that respect becomes a lot more feasible. Just a couple of more examples, I suppose. Analyze your customer data, and people do this, but do you really understand your target audience? Do you understand your kind of the ages of your clients? Do you understand, are there children in your client base? Or are you dealing with what are the age bands and how do they respond to your client bases, to your products, excuse me? And in that way, you can really focus on a target audience by understanding the audience that responds to your products and understanding them in a little bit of a deeper way than just, putting up some basic demographic information. And then I think what's becoming more and more important, and specifically with TCF treating customers fairly and privacy imperatives, is making sure that when you design products and you look at actually putting new products or services in, that you can actually analyze not just what you think internally about the business case, but take external data, comparison data from other market research sources, and actually help to verify or to validate a product, a minimum viable proposition for a product, for example, can be incredibly helpful as well if you have the data to do that. Thanks, Caroline. I think just if you can move forward. I think I've got a couple of minutes. All right. So that was some ideas in a nutshell. I think the opportunity or the trajectory, I think, for big data and transformation in Africa is well, in my opinion, it's huge. I think Africa is poised for growth for the foreseeable future and really hopefully for the next few decades. Big data is going to be crucial in this story. There are, however, some practical concerns. A lot of you have seen the connectivity map of Africa. It's talking about the sea cables coming in. There's some fiber under construction and really a need to build this infrastructure out, and a lot of further investment in not just fiber connectivity, also satellite coverage, and of course 5G infrastructure, which is going to be necessary to drive the IoT or the Internet of Things revolution, as it's been suggested. But obviously, continuing investment in this continuing infrastructure, and it would also be really nice to see some African companies launching more satellites instead of just our friends in the US. but that's another story. And I think again, I think many organizations have, as I've said, have embarked on this journey, but they really need to ensure that they're working towards an integrated data culture. Where you're going to have this kind of analytics function, which is going to evolve all the time, and you need to make that a part of your big data value chain, if you like. in the absence of that, I think it is difficult to deliver meaningful outcomes and to really have outcomes and decisions that you can rely on, that you can measure, and that you can then demonstrate have come from your strategic objectives and created this kind of, and then the outcomes from that go back into your strategy, and hopefully that in itself makes your business stronger and I suppose more aware of its environment, its competitors, its target audiences, and its risks. And that's it. Thank you. Please feel free to type any questions or to contact me a little bit later.
Deon, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation on a really big topic. It's not just the data that's big; it's the topic that's big. And I think that probably what most organizations are finding when it comes to this space is they just lack the tools, the skills, and the processes to effectively, do this job, to gather, store, analyze, and execute against the insights that lie in the customer data. I mean, what are the first steps? What should they be doing first when considering a project of this nature, starting to pull something close to some of the use cases you mentioned?
Look, I think, you're right, Louisa, and there's certain challenges around that. Particularly from a banking perspective, there's some issues, first of all, around data storage and the need to use terrestrial servers rather than being able to use cloud for obvious reasons and disaster recovery and so on and so forth. One of the challenges that we encountered was within a banking environment is just having different core systems, and also in banks that have obviously grown up and been around for many years, there are legacy systems. And so often, as I said, that data conditioning, the data cleansing, getting a data mart in place or a data lake, and that means just being able to take data from maybe a CRM system, from a credit risk system, from your finance system, your capital management system, and having that all be able to talk to each other in a data mart and be able to draw that, to have some kind of sandbox where analysts and your data scientists can play with that data. And to get that right is sometimes the most difficult thing. In a clean, or not clean, I suppose in a new startup business, which has a single core system, everything is digitized already. It makes your analytics journey a little bit easier. But I really think that the place to start is to make sure, and this is where your IT guys and your IT department becomes critical. They are generally the custodians of the storage and the way that the data is architected or the data framework. Very important to get that right. The next level is being spoken of by Gartner as not as a data mart or a data lake, but as a data fabric. And a data fabric is an architecture that kind of weaves through your organization. It involves hybrid cloud solutions. It involves all your applications, and it's a fabric really that talks to the architecture and data throughout your organization. So start there, get that right, and then the tools. The next question around tools in a universe of tools is one that you'll answer with specific reference to your needs.
Wonderful. Deon, thank you. Unfortunately, I could talk to you forever, but unfortunately we run out of time. So Thanks you so much for the time and for taking us through a really insightful presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending the time with us.